Hello, welcome to Series 1, Episode 1 of Learn Synthesis with VCV Rack. Fundamentally, this overall series is about synthesis, and we start right from the beginning and learn all the fundamental concepts and progress from there. We'll be utilizing the software VCV Rack because it is cross-platform. It works for Mac, Windows, as well as Linux in its various distributions. And basically anyone can use it. You just need to know what you're doing, and that's what I'm here to do. And basically it's something where if you're using a DAW and some software plugins right now and you want to get beyond the out-of-the-box sounds that it comes with, maybe you want to tailor some of those sounds, maybe you want to make your own, you have an idea in your head for a sound and you just want to make it happen, we'll be covering all those fundamentals and concepts to help you achieve the kind of sound that you're looking for. And we'll be using VCV Rack to do it, which may end up being a very powerful tool that you can add to your arsenal because there's a lot you can do with this software, and the free version comes packed without any limitations. The paid version just adds more modules and some more functionality, but you can do so much with the free version that you'll be hard pressed to find the limits on that anytime soon. So in any case, buckle up and let's get ready for the adventure. Okay, so here we are at the VCV Rack website, vcvrack.com. And this is the page you'll get to when you first go to the website. You want to download the software. All you do is click here in this handy link, and you can scroll down. This introduces you to some of the features of the software. As you can see, it is a Eurorack modeling system where basically you have all these different modules that you can use to create various synthesizers, or you can make your all-in-one sequencer synthesizer system all together. You can record out of it. You can utilize it with a DAW, and in the paid version, there is the functionality of turning it into a DST. In the free version, you can also utilize it with a DAW as long as you have a MIDI loopback or virtual MIDI connection of some sort. When you get down to here, this is your download links for Mac, Windows, as well as Linux. The Mac and Windows versions pretty much have the standard installation process for those systems. For Linux, you basically download an archive, extract the folder out, and I'll show you what to do from there. But basically, if you need help with installation, you can find that help on this website, but it's not difficult. It's pretty much out of the box. Back when I used Windows, it was an easy install. And you have the option for a desktop icon and all that stuff. And I'm told from Mac users that it is no problem installing the software. Okay, so let's take a look at it. I do want to point out that as you, when you open it for the first time, you are going to get this tips menu to start off with. It's useful to read through these. You can go next and previous and go through the different tips and so forth. And when you're done with them, you can turn this off and not have it there when you open it up. When you first open up VCV Rack for the first time, it's going to open up its initial template, which is kind of like a demo. And so what we're going to do first here is basically get sound going on it, and you know, work with you can work with either a computer keyboard or a MIDI keyboard And I'll be basically showing you both. But anyway, how do we get going? Well, we can use this view to do it, and there's a little notes module here that gives you some instructions. First of all, I'm going to show you a little bit of the menus here just to make things a little bit more comfortable for you maybe. Up here in Engine, you do have the ability to select the sampling rate that you want to be at, or leave it on auto. And then there's also a way that you can check your system's performance to see if it's being taxed or not. My experience is this software runs pretty lightly. It's not heavy on your system, but when you start making some of your monster creations, that could, you might want to look at that a little bit as you go. Under the View menu, I can get on to the actual View menu right here. You see that there are a few controls here for customizing your view. This is something to bear in mind as you proceed and as you're doing things. If there's some things that you want to adjust, you can. For example, the opacity of your patch cables. If you make them too opaque, they may cover up some labels on the interface that you need to read. If they're not opaque enough, maybe it'll be hard to see what's connected to what and so forth. All that can be adjusted here. You have in this menu the ability to change the theme from light or dark. And there's a high contrast theme should you want that. There is also a zoom control here where you can zoom in and out gradually. But there is also the added convenience that you can use the arrow keys to move around in the view, as well as the scroll vertical and the scroll at the bottom of the screen for horizontal. Gives you a little more precision, and the mouse scroll wheel will give you a vertical scroll. If you want to zoom in and out, you have that zoom function in the view menu, and you also have control plus minus to zoom in and out. I would imagine in Mac that might be command plus or minus. So there you go. There's some convenient tips for getting your way around. Now let's get some sound here and test that out to begin with. I am going to zoom in here on this module, arrow up a little bit, and this here, MIDI CV, this is going to be our friend in the beginning stages for a lot of things. This basically brings MIDI in and converts it to, well, in this case, it's kind of like a virtual CV, control voltage, which is how analog synthesizers communicate information, in this case, especially pitch. So this is where we want to start to get MIDI control. Now, if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you can use your computer keyboard. The first option at the top, though, is selecting kind of overall what to use as MIDI. I'm in Linux, and it's giving me an option of ALSA or Jack. For MIDI, I use ALSA. If you're in Windows, you will probably select Windows MIDI, because Windows kind of governs your MIDI devices. And in Mac, there's probably a comparable option there. A lot of times you don't need to work with that too much, but you do have in here the option of computer keyboard, so you can select that if you don't have a MIDI controller. But if you have a MIDI controller, select the way in which you are going to connect to that controller, meaning Windows MIDI, ALSA, Jack, whatever it is you're using. Then you select your controller here in the second option. And then as I play my keyboard here, you see we do get a response from this scope here. That means that it is receiving MIDI information and things are happening. But we're not hearing anything because we need to set up our audio module here. Now the MIDI to CV and audio modules will be used anytime, well, the audio module anytime you want to hear anything, and the MIDI to CV anytime you're using some MIDI control that's external in some way, whether it's the computer keyboard or a MIDI controller. Now for the audio module, what you want to do here is at the top, select kind of like the way in which the audio is going to be communicated in your system. In this case, in Linux, I will use Jack. In Mac, you'll select Core Audio. In Windows, if your interface has ASIO and you install the drivers, you would use that. If not, then use Wasapi, W-A-S-A-P-I. If that doesn't work out for you, then you'll probably have to use MME DirectX. I don't know whether it says MME or DirectX or Direct Sound, but that would be the option you would use as a last resort, depending on whether you have an interface that supports ASIO. If you can do Wasapi, if you don't have ASIO, do Wasapi though. Okay, so after you select that in the top section, the bottom section is where you actually select the interface or outputs that you're going to use. And here's my option here. And I'm seeing response, but not hearing it. I need to double check my selection. Let me see, M series. There we go. I selected. Okay, so as you see, kind of intense here. So what I want to do now that we've checked sound and everything, we're going to basically make a very basic instrument just to start learning the modules. Incidentally, before doing this, you want to make sure of what modules you have. And usually the thing is you want to install some, but you want to install them little by little. And the way you do that is by going to Library up here. The first time you open this, it will have a slot for you to put in your email address and password. Those are things you set up on the website. So if we go to the top of the website, and there we go. You see I have an account option here. That's because I am logged in. But basically you would log in. All you do is provide an email address, create a password, and that's it. Now, if you're worried about providing an email address, I installed VCV Rack back several years ago before Rack 2, when it was just VCV Rack. And I have never received any email advertisements from them or anything like that. This is really just to provide you with a login so you can manage what modules are in your library. And so you don't have to worry about, any kind of over advertisement or anything like that. I didn't receive any. Okay, so you set up your account first of all, and then over here in VCV Rack, you enter that information. And then what you can do is select Browse Library, and it takes you to the website, and this is where you can browse what modules you want to add. It does come with a few fundamental modules that it calls the fundamental package by VCV Rack themselves. Now, VCV Rack has its own development, and it is open source software, so other developers can develop for it. And it calls this brands, basically like different developers in the community would be different brands. Some of the modules are for sale and some of them are free. It's up to the different developers. But what I recommend you do is scroll down to VCV. That means these are made by the the developers of VCV Rack itself. And then you can hit this tab here, free, and then all the modules listed would be from VCV themselves, and they would be free. And so you could go through, and you'll see here for each of these, it says included for me. That's because I already downloaded them. But on this site, you can basically check off all the ones you want to add to your library. And as you see, it's a bunch. Now, there are plenty of other brands that are good to have, but it's good in the learning process to kind of start off with a core set of modules, get to know them, get comfortable with them, because then as you build different things, you know what the modules do that you have. And you don't have a whole bunch of modules there that you haven't tried yet, and they're just kind of in the way, and you don't know what they do. And, it's good to start off little by little and then try them out. So that way you can install some, try them out, and if you decide you're not going to use those, you can uninstall them and so forth. But once you select the modules you want over here, you can then go back over here to your library selection. And basically, you would see a red circle up here saying that there's signifying that there's an update. Basically, you selected more libraries and they're not installed yet. And then there's an update all option that appears in here when you want to basically add those modules to your library on the computer. And so it'll take care of that installation itself. Incidentally, I should point out how VCV Rack saves things. Basically, if you are Mac or Windows, in your Documents folder, it will create a folder. In this case, it would say Rack 2. I have one here that says Rack. That's from the Windows version that I'm still using through Wine, the Windows implementation for Linux. And so that's why it doesn't say Rack 2, but yours would say Rack 2. And this would be a default folder where you would be able to save patches. And if you want to, you can make like a patches subfolder or all sorts of subfolders in here to save it out. You can technically save the patches that you make, meaning the module arrangements and sounds that you design. You can basically save those out to where you want, but it's convenient to keep them in one place. And this folder is where on disk it's keeping track of what you have installed. Now for Linux users, basically when you download the package, it is an archive and you can place it where you want. I put it in my home folder. Basically, I extracted the folder from the archive. It's Rack 2 free, and put it in my home folder. And this is where I can run the application from. But the actual application may be here or wherever you decide to put it. But that's not where it's stored. It's not the default location for patches, and that's not where it stores like your library. You need to be able to show hidden files or go into the terminal and look for .rack2. And that's where basically the stuff gets stored. So now you know where things are going to be on your computer and you can use them accordingly. Incidentally, if you are a Linux user and you want to be able to, like I'm using Linux Mint, but basically if you have a system where you want to be able to add an icon and stuff like that for your graphic desktop environment, leave a comment and I'll tell you what you can do in order to do that, because I had to do a little bit of a workaround here in Linux Mint to get it, Rack 2 free is what we're talking about, the Linux version. This is the Windows version I'm running through Wine, but that's just in Rack 1 from when I used to use Windows. Now that I'm using Linux, I have the Linux version here. But basically, you can make it nice and convenient to use just like any other application on your system. Since you're not installing a package or a flat pack or anything like that, there's a little workaround to make it nice and convenient. So anyway, here we go. Let's make some sound. What you can do, if you want to clear these out nice and quick, hit Control A, probably Command A in Mac, and then hit delete. It basically uses the Control C, Control V for copy and paste, Control X for cut. And of course, you can go to the edit menu and see all those commands there. It has all the standard commands. If you want to see what the keyboard shortcuts are for your operating system, that's where you would find them. Okay, so let's make something basic here. Let's start with source to destination. Whether you're using the computer keyboard or a MIDI keyboard, you want to start with the MIDI to CV module. So we're going to right click, and you see here, you can easily get overwhelmed with the amount of modules. You will probably have some less because I also have Bafaco, the Bafaco brand of a certain package of modules from them, and some other modules that I've installed. But if you do what I did there and showed you, you install all the VCV modules that are free, you'll still have a healthy set of modules. And as you learn more, you can add more later. Up here, you can sort these by brand as well as by tags, which is really like categories for types of modules. But I think it's good to get in the habit of getting to know each module that you're going to use and stick with, and just type it into the search box up here. MIDI. Just type in MIDI and you see all the modules that deal with MIDI. Some of these are for bringing in MIDI control messages, MIDI sync and clock. And the one that we want here is just simply called MIDI CV, MIDI to CV. So we click on that. There we go. We have it. Now, once again, we're going to set this up. Control plus, zooms in, arrow keys moves over. Here we go. We can make it nice and big. All right, it still is remembering that I'm on ALSA, but I do need to, once again, select my keyboard. And then it's not hooked up to anything yet, so you're not going to get anything if you play the keyboard. Next thing we're going to add is a VCO. This is where sound begins in basic synthesis. And there is a VCO from VCV. And basically what we want to do is tell this VCO that it's going to be controlled by a MIDI keyboard. Now it has a big knob here that says frequency, and in physical Eurorack analog synthesis systems, frequently you will have a knob for controlling frequency, and you can use that knob to control pitch as well. But if you want things to be aligned to precise notes with precise tunings, you would want to use MIDI in control of that. It has 4 outputs at the bottom. Anytime you see a jack and it's got a black background to it, that means it's an output from that module. MIDI to CV basically receives in from your keyboard, and these jacks are like outputs coming out of the module connecting to other modules, to their inputs. So here on VCO, we have inputs and we have outputs. And that's an important thing to know. Now we want to hear sound, so I am going to add the audio module. As we'll see, in order to make it a useful sound, we'll have to do more than that, but at least we'll get some sound to begin with. And I believe this is our basic audio module right here. Now, this audio module can bring sound in and out from VCV Rack. So if you use some sort of virtual audio connection with other software, or of course, when you set your audio module up for your interface, you're setting it up for the inputs and outputs. So it's right here. I select jack once again. And this would be the same thing I explained earlier for Windows users and Mac users. For Mac users, it's easy. Core audio. And then you select your device. Okay, so now a quick way to get sound is to connect up one of these waveforms here, sine, triangle, saw, or square wave, and connect them straight to the left mono input over here. And then just click, drag, dangle the cable out nowhere, drop it. That's how you disconnect it. I did that pretty quick because that tone would just keep playing. We have no control over it, basically. But what I'm going to do is turn this volume down so we can leave it on a little bit. And I'll show you a few things here. Click on the sign. If ever, for one reason or another, you're not getting a patch cable connected when you click and drag, well, there we got it that time. But I just want to point out, you can also go from the input to the output. It doesn't have to be output to input, as long as you are connecting an output to an input. So we can just use our frequency knob here. All right, and there's a number of ways of controlling this with different devices that you can add, like step sequencers and so forth. So this obviously needs something else to be hooked up to. Oh, this is pulse width. What am I thinking? Of course, we need to be using a square wave to get that. Cool stuff. So anyway, yeah. And if you had physical modules here, you'd be turning these knobs and doing that sort of thing. But let's control pitch with our keyboard. Now, if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you could, of course, just set this up for computer keyboard. But now, pitch control, what's that? V-oct. If you are not familiar with the lingo, that could be a little bit of confusing for you. But basically, this is modeling Eurorack, or basically analog synthesis. And in analog synthesis, like before MIDI, and even after MIDI to a large degree, everything's communicated through electrical patch connections that are carrying a voltage current. And the term CV, for example, means control voltage, where the voltage level is basically determining certain control parameters. And in this case, when it says V-oct, it's basically saying, you know, this is a connection where voltage is controlling the octave you're in, but it's also controlling those pitches within the octave, dividing each octave up into 12 semitones. Now, this is digital software, so that's not really happening, but it's using the same terminology. So we're going to connect that up to here. Let me turn the volume up a little bit here. There we go. I'm controlling it with my keyboard. If you're using the computer keyboard, which is often called a QWERTY keyboard, you know, the first, what is it, 6 letters of the top left letter portion of your keyboard. There are charts online that you can look for. Look for QWERTY keyboard chart, something like that. And you should be able to find a chart that tells you what note is which key on the keyboard. A lot of software like Ableton Live has that option, Reason has that option, Bitwig has that option, where you can actually use your computer keyboard to enter notes and play notes. I got to use an external MIDI controller to be of any use, of any musical use myself personally, but It's another way of getting sound and entering notes into DAWs, or in this case, playing different notes in VCV Rack. Okay, so let's see here. We got our pitch control hooked up, but as you see, I'm turning the volume knob on and off. There's got to be a better way. So we're going to do that. I'm going to disconnect this cable here. What we need are two modules here to achieve this step. One thing is we need to shape the sound in a way. Be able to control the level of the sound, the amplitude of the sound over time. And then we need a way for that to take place. So I know that sounds cryptic and weird. I shouldn't say things like that, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to add, I'm going to search for EG, more lingo here. EG means envelope gate, or envelope generator, excuse me. And in this case, that's what we need. We need what's called an amplitude envelope. And what we get here, by selecting that one, is an ADSR EG, an ADSR envelope generator. ADSR standing for attack, decay, sustain, release. And as soon as we get this hooked up, I'll explain that in more detail. But what we need next is something that says, okay, this shape that we're going to put on the amplitude, which we perceive as loudness, this shape, there's got to be a way for this, control this. Our VCO is making the sound. We want to use this to shape the sound, shape its amplitude. Okay, so we're going to right click here, and we're going to use a VCA, voltage controlled amplifier, to do that. And this is a good one to start with. I'm using all VCV modules right now. Okay, so first of all, we need to tell this envelope when to start and stop. And we can use gate to do that. Gate in synthesis is basically Control Z. Anytime you accidentally drag modules out of place, you can hit Control Z to undo it. Gate is something in synthesis that is frequently used for turning notes on and off, although it can be used for other things. It's basically a signal that says on or off, or gate is open, gate is closed. And we hook it up to the gate here. Gate output from MIDI to CV, which is basically giving it MIDI note on and off messages, and putting it here to tell the envelope when to start and when to stop. Okay, so we've hooked that up. Now the sound, let's go back to sine wave. We want to put that in our amplifier here, where it just says in. Now this input is not labeled here, but if you hover over it, it tells you what it is. That is where we want to take the output of our envelope. An ADSR is a type of envelope, and we'll see we'll see why in just a moment. But basically, we connect that up to here. Now, you saw the light go down. Basically, this is controlling this amplifier, and the sound right here, the sine wave, is going into it, where this will then control that sound's amplitude and come out here, where we can go in to our audio module. Turn this up. It's about halfway. Now I'm going to press a key in the keyboard. And we get a response. Now, envelope. Let's get into a little more detail here. An envelope basically, well, it can be used in multiple ways, but most often it's used to control amplitude, which we perceive as loudness. Attack, decay, sustain, release begins with attack. That's how quickly the sound comes in. And you can control that here with this slider. You hear it coming quicker where it reaches this point here faster, you know, the peak amplitude. And then this is this decay portion here. Basically the fall off from that peak amplitude and basically how long that takes. As you move this slider, you're judging time, just like with attack. How quick is the attack? The more you turn it up, the longer the time interval and the slower the attack, really. And same thing with decay here. So if we want to make this a nice punctuated attack, it's good to make it short on the attack as well as the decay. You hear that boom, boom. That's this spike right here. And then this point is the sustained level. This is not time in this case. This is the level of amplitude. If we turn this down, we'll be able to hear this attack portion and, you know, the peak created by the attack and decay segments. We'll hear that really stand out in comparison to the sustain. Now, when I accidentally play a second note without releasing the first, it kind of smoothly transitions. Okay, so you don't hear it as distinctly. Yeah, when you play one after the other without releasing, it doesn't re-trigger this envelope shape because it's as, you know, it's basically set up that when the note goes on, it starts the envelope. When it goes off, it releases. But if you're still holding that note, when you play other notes, it's still in the sustain portion, so it's going to keep things there. There are ways of basically refining that. And incidentally, if you're wondering, oh, one note at a time only? Well, no, it's not a hard limit. It's just, since this is modeling the analog world, you'll need to use multiple oscillators in order to generate multiple notes at the same time. And there's special ways of handling that in VCV Rack, and we'll get onto those sorts of things in the future. Excuse me, I needed to cough there. So anyway, and then you have your release portion. How quickly will it release? We turn it all the way down. It should be a quick release, meaning after we release the key of the keyboard. There we go. It goes away right away, which is not very attractive. So, you can't drag that handle around. Oh, yeah. There we go. And so basically there is a peak amplitude that it rises to over your attack time. It decays from it to your sustain level. If we want the sustain level to be closer to that peak amplitude, we turn it up. Okay, now there's another thing we can do in playing around with this. We have velocity that comes in here, and all sorts of other MIDI messages that come in here. The more you know about MIDI, the more you'll be able to handle those. But stick around, we're going to keep learning more and more as we go. So let's just work with velocity now. That's the quickness with which you hit a key. The quicker you hit it, meaning with more velocity, typically. Now, sound designers that make the audio plugins and the instrument plugins basically determine how that's going to work. Or that's as true with built-in sounds on keyboards and stuff that have their own sounds and everything. But typically what they do is usually when you hit a keyboard quickly, you're hitting it harder, and therefore it should sound louder. So a lot of times they have it control that. But velocity in of itself doesn't natively do that. It needs to be sent to some sort of portion of a synthesizer or a virtual instrument where it tells it that, you know? So in this case, we could take this velocity and connect it up to attack to control our attack. Now I'm going to hit the key softly. Now I'm going to hit it hard. And we're seeing no difference. That's because these knobs right above the inputs, and it's true for these knobs as well above these inputs here, basically allow you to regulate how much this input is going to affect what you're doing. And in the middle, typically, it's not going to do anything. Let's see if we turn it up. Now I'm going to hit it softly. Now I'm going to hit it hard. You see, when I hit it hard, it was a much more gradual attack. Now, the thing about that is that's the opposite of what you would intuitively want. Like when you hit it quick, you want a quicker response. So we're going to turn this the other way, invert it. That was soft. That's hard. We're not hearing a big difference. Maybe I need to back off on it a little bit. There, when I'm hitting it softer, we're seeing that's hard. That was quick. I'm hitting soft, but I'm not getting very slow. So what I might, a slow attack. So what I might do, turn up the attack here. There, I'm hitting it softly. I'm getting a slow attack. Now let's hit it hard. And I get a quicker attack. So you got to play with the parameters a bit. And now you don't know what speed I'm hitting different keys with. I was just trying it out there. But yeah, generally when I'm hitting it softer, I'm getting a slower attack. And when I'm hitting it harder, I'm getting a faster attack. And so the more that I work with these, the more of the better response I'll get, the more comfortable response. Now here's the thing, unlike the real world, you can actually connect multiple cables up to multiple jacks. Since we have a velocity going to attack, we can connect up decay as well by going from the input over here and dragging to the output. So now velocity is controlling both of these. Let's do a similar thing with the decay setting as with the attack setting. Now let's see. That's a soft. And now hard. Quicker. So by doing it to both of those parameters, I'm getting differences in attack more pronounced because the decay also affects the perception of that attack. The quicker the decay in conjunction with the quickness of the attack gives you more of a punctuated attack. If the decay is a little bit slow after the attack, it's not falling down from that attack peak fast enough to the sustain level for it to really make a big perceivable difference, you know? So what we're going to do here is now take the sustain and hook it up to velocity. And what we're going to get in response now, well, we'll see. Sustain is level. These were time. How quick is the attack? How quick is the decay? Sustain is level. So let's see if we can get our velocity to control the level a little bit, because that's one thing that still hasn't been happening. I'm hitting the soft and slow, and now hard. We're not getting a big difference because, once again, we didn't adjust this knob. Now, when we turned it to the right before, we got longer attack, or more in response to more velocity. So in this case, I think that's good for sustain, because we want more level in response to a higher velocity. Now let me see here. Maybe if I turn this down a bit. This knob has to do with the response to the input, but it also does affect the graph here. But this slider allows you to adjust the graph, but doesn't affect what it perceives the input as. Those are fairly soft and then strong. Let me see here. I am getting a difference. Once again, it is a little less, so I'm going to turn this all the way up. Maybe put this all the way down. Yep, so I am getting difference there. Different modules will respond in different ways. Perhaps other ADSR type modules would have more of a pronounced difference there, and so forth. So, you know, it's about playing with the parameters. Now, this is modeling Eurorack systems. So getting such an expressive response, especially on a sine tone, is not a it is not a common thing. But anyway, we've learned how to shape our sound here. You know, get MIDI in, get a sound source, and then shape its amplitude. I think that's good for this episode, the first episode. And in the next episode, we're going to listen to other wave shapes. And then coming up pretty soon, we're going to work with other ways of controlling things in order to get more interesting sounds. But right now, we have these 4 basic wave shapes. Yeah, and I'm hearing a bit more of an expressive response. It's not really a change in response, it's just how the sound gets perceived. And maybe the attack can be backed off on a little bit. There we go. Incidentally, if you've been finding this episode useful or informative in any way, help motivating me to keep these things coming. So please hit the like button. Every click counts. And subscribe to the channel for more like this and in other software. I also have a series, Learn Synthesis with Pure Data, if you're into programming sound with a graphic programming environment, and exploring multimedia art with PD Lork, where we basically see how to take audio and create visual results from that audio to make some multimedia art. Okay, now I should say that there are other things that you can use as a VCA that maybe has knobs and more control over the loudness that comes as a result. Because right now we can't control this peak is going to be this peak. We can say how quick it gets there, how quickly it falls off from there, and then what the sustain level is in response. But we aren't able to really control our VCA here. Or have like velocity influence the level coming out of the VCA too much. So we can actually do that. I'm going to add one little, here at the end, I'm going to add one little segment to this that I think that might help us achieve a little bit more expressiveness. It's probably worth doing. I am going to add another set of these. I'm going to shift click both of these, hit Control C to copy, and just click over here and hit Control V to paste. I think that might be Command C and Command V in Mac. And there we go. So now what we have is another set of envelope and amplifier. So right now, this is having an audio output of the results we've been hearing so far. That is going to go into the input here, the audio input of this VCA, which, since we copied it, already has a connection from the envelope generator to the control of the VCA. Now all we need to do to get this controlled, we're going to have this controlled by velocity. So that means right here, it has a gate input. Let's put that under velocities control. Gate, remember, is open, close, on, off. Velocity is a range of 128 different values, 0 to 127 of the velocity. So in that case, I don't know that gate is going to get, let's see. Well, we didn't hook it up to audio yet. I just switched. Sometimes when I drag, I don't click accurately. There we go. Whoa, wait a minute. All right, something's hooked up wrong. Let's see what it is. Velocity's controlling gate. That may not be. The audio out from this is going in here. And this envelope is controlling that. Oh, look at this. Our sustain's all the way down. That can't be good. Okay, I am getting more of a difference between strong hits of the key and lighter hits of the key. But I think we need it's helping a little bit, but we still have this shape here. It would be better to have more velocity control over the amplifier itself. But basically, we're going to be progressing our way towards that, getting more sensitivity in the response. But at this point, in this stage of the game, I would say this isn't really worth doing. So we'll take it out and just hook this up. Now here, as you see, there is a level control on the audio. There's no level control on the amplifier, just what you feed it here that's controlled by the envelope. but nothing to really directly take that velocity and change these levels. Although those level changes would probably be so quick, we would hear artifacts and snaps anyway. So right now, I think this is our good start. I'm going to take a snapshot of it. For the thumbnail of the video. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've learned a lot. I hope this was a good first step in learning synthesis or learning VCV Rack or both. Until next time, take care and stay free.